Excuse me. Perfect. Thank you, Andrea. Perfectly timed. Welcome, everyone. My name is Katie Andrews. I'm a registered dietitian and corporate wellness expert here today for our presentation on nutrition for active aging and fitness-minded adults on behalf of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. I want to thank you so much for having me. I had the pleasure of joining you last month, just a few weeks back, for a presentation on added sugar. We were really focusing on nutrition content. And our topic today is a little bit of a shift away from that. We're talking more about nutrition for aging and longevity. How do you incorporate nutrition, movement, immunity into a kind of long lifespan? And so we're really going to focus on how the way that we move and fuel our body really affects us as we head into aging. I had a big birthday this year. I turned 40. I think with every birthday that we have, our approach to our body and our minds and our health should shift a little bit. Doesn't mean there's anything monumentally different you necessarily have to be doing or that you've been doing anything wrong, of course. But our bodies do change with age. Those of you who've experienced that, I'm sure know exactly what I'm talking about. And so it is valuable to understand those changes and how they occur and what you can do from a nutrition and health perspective to address your body's needs as those changes happen. So that is our focus for today. If I didn't get to meet you last time, welcome. And I'm so glad that you were able to attend our presentation today. A little bit about me. As I said, I am a registered dietitian. I've been working in the corporate wellness space for about 12 years now. I also work in a private practice with my one-on-one clients. Spend mostly all of my time educating people on nutrition, health, and wellness. So there's kind of no topic under the wellness umbrella I'm not passionate about, but nutrition is kind of where my roots lie. So lots of good information that comes very naturally to me that I'm excited to share today. So because we don't have a ton of time, I'm going to jump right into the material. I will say we have our chat box right over here in the corner. I'm just going to put a message on the chat box right there so you guys know. I welcome questions throughout. I will see it in real time, I promise. If I don't answer it in real time, don't worry. It just means that I'm clocking it for the end of the session, but don't feel as though I'm not going to address your question. I also am always happy to stay on a couple minutes at the end. If you want to ask a question live, put it into the chat box or even come off, mute, turn on your camera. I'm happy to address those questions as well. So our agenda for today, what are the changes that occur as we age? There are physiological and internal metabolic changes that occur with our bodies as we age that have to do with hormone production related to menopause, that have to do with our bone health, that have to do with how we absorb nutrition from our food. So let's talk about that first. Then we'll talk about the key nutrients that are impacted by aging. So our caloric intake that's, impacts our metabolism, protein, calcium, and vitamin D, antioxidants, and then omega-3 fatty acids. Now, you could say that all nutrients are affected by aging, of course, but these are the most research-driven sources. So that's really where I want to focus today. We'll talk a little about fitness, immunity, and then we'll leave some time, as I said, for questions and answers at the very end. So nutrition and aging. There are key changes that occur as we age that affect our nutrition needs. So if you look at nutrition needs across the spectrum, right? From a newborn baby to, an elderly individual in their 80s, 90s that is a little bit more sedentary. Nutrition needs change, right? If you've raised kids, you know that there's certain nutrients that they need from birth to age 2. Then we focus on other nutrients during the bone building years. And then we might focus more on fatty acids and brain health and building our bone health, which has a peak kind of in late adolescence, early adulthood. So, chronological age versus biological age, these are two very different things. But nutrition and physical activity are the keys to feeling like you're 60 when you're 80. That can also mean feeling like you're 30 when you're 50, or, having any type of age range in how we feel versus how we look. I love those things of, 40 is the new 30 and, 50 is the new 40, or however it goes. The idea is, we don't have to feel the age that we are necessarily seeing on a timeline. We have the ability in the way that we treat our body and the way we take care of our body to have a different experience when it comes to the aging process. But there are key things that we need to be careful of and take care of in terms of aging. And those are really the first parts of this presentation where I want to focus. So our metabolic rate or our caloric needs naturally change over time. As we age, our resting metabolic rate and our calorie needs start to go down, and the importance of maintaining your metabolic rate starts to go up. So I've got this super helpful picture here of this lovely wood stove. The wood stove is one of my favorite ways, one of my favorite metaphors to really describe your body's metabolism. So if you've had a wood stove in your home, or if we're big fire burners here in the Northeast in the winter, I feel like it's cold in my office today. And so you probably know, if you burn fires frequently, that the heat that is created by the fire doesn't dissipate immediately, right? Unless you douse the fire with water, a fire's not going to go out right away. Our metabolism is very similar. And if we think back, before we get into aging, just think about how your metabolism functions over, let's say, a 24-hour period. So as you get into the later part of your day, I like to call it metabolic sundowning, your metabolism starts to slow down. Why? Because your body knows, based on the outside light, based on the pattern of your day, that you're probably starting to gear up to sleep when your metabolic needs are going to go down and your metabolism is allowed to rest. So as this is actually connected with circadian rhythm and daylight, as the daylight starts to wane, it starts to get darker, our body begins melatonin production. We actually slow down our metabolic rate because your body's going, oh, she's going to be sitting on the couch watching Netflix and then going to bed soon. She doesn't need all of this, highly affected metabolic burn going on. And so then when we go into sleep, hopefully 7 to 9 hours a night, your metabolism is getting a chance to rest. Your immunity does the same thing because your body has a lot of very important tasks that it has to take care of during that rest period. And being metabolically active is not one of them. So if you picture your wood fire, right, you built it in the beginning of the day. I'll get back to that in a second. It's kind of running at a pretty high pace. Every time you eat, that's like putting a log into the fire. The rate of burn continues higher and higher until you let the fire to kind of start to slow down closer to the evening. And then it goes down to, let's call it a simmer, embers overnight. It never goes out completely, right? And so then what do you need to do in the morning? You stoke your fire, you open up the door, you put your log in, you add some oxygen, and that burn starts to come back up again. This is the typical 24-hour pattern of metabolic burn. Now, as we age, that metabolic burn starts to decrease, that resting metabolic rate, the rate of your fire that it burns when you're doing no physical activity, which means that our need for the wood, the fuel, the calorie input that we put into our body, the energy increments will start to go down as well. And we start to see this in individuals. I started to see it in my parents are in their mid-70s. I have them over for dinner once a week. And I can think back to a couple of years ago going, oh, I feel like they're eating a lot less than they used to eat when we were at dinner. And now it gets to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I must be eating 3 times what they're eating. And sometimes my 8-year-old son is eating 3 times what I'm eating, right? Because they're less physically active. Their day has less physical demands on it. They're not, they don't exercise as much as they probably should, but basically their body's physiological needs for higher metabolic output have gone down, which means that the importance of maintaining that metabolic rate is really important. This is why we start to see sometimes weight gain that we don't want to see in older adults who became, maybe they stopped commuting for work, maybe they stopped doing regular physical activity. So the way to produce more heat to keep that metabolic rate up and maintained is to make sure that you're eating frequently, you're eating first thing in the morning, and you're keeping that physical activity up. We'll talk about that all in one more moment. So first focus for today, how do you keep your diet healthy as you're aging and keep that metabolic regularity high? Well, the key is to eat a variety of healthy foods every day. So this is, I wish I could say this is our American government's version, but this is actually the Canadians' version of what they call a balanced plate. We call it My Plate here in the US. But I love the Canadian government's version because it's a plate of actual food instead of an image of a plate with different shapes on it, right? Which is nowhere near as detailed. So you want to be emphasizing your nutrient dense versus calorie dense foods. Very oftentimes as people get older, especially if maybe they're not going into a regular office anymore, or they're living at home, or a spouse has passed away and they're on their own, they start to rely on more highly processed convenience foods. So things that are already prepared, that are easy to purchase, that are maybe kind of a quick hit of calories, but not a lot of good quality sustained energy. So you want to make sure you're still focusing on your nutrient dense foods. Even if your portions are decreasing, still aim for 50% fruits and vegetables. Take the other half of your plate. You want half of that to be your high quality, sometimes plant-based protein, doesn't have to be all the time, just sometimes, and then your whole grains, making sure that you're getting your fiber intake, very important as well for maintaining that gut health as we age. This combination will really help with what I like to call the triad of satiety. So protein, fat, and fiber. These are the three things that make us feel full and satisfied by our foods. So very important that we're still getting all three. Protein intake naturally declines with age. We'll get to that in 1 second, but making sure you're not just getting the grains, you're not just getting the fruits or vegetables, but that protein is playing a role as well. Remember that energy, calories are only the energy increments. So saying, you know, this snack has this many calories in it, that's meeting my needs for the day, doesn't really check the box. You've got to make sure that you have things that are satisfying you both physically and emotionally, and that's having this protein, fat, and fiber combination. Even as portions go down, important to keep this balance. So let's focus for a second, nutritionally more on protein. So as I said, protein is something that we naturally see go down much more than I would say carbohydrates than even fat with aging. Protein is required for tissue repair, structure, and maintenance within your cells. So you can imagine as we age and the cells, the structure of our body is aging as well, it's so important to maintain that protein intake. So on average, 45 to 60 grams of protein a day is necessary for adults. I would say that's even on the low end, and it is also dependent on your gender, your body size, and your physical activity levels. Enzymes and hormones are also proteins. So you can imagine if you're going through perimenopause or menopause, you're experiencing hormone shifts that come along with aging, you might see some impacts on your body related to your protein stores as well. Enzymes, so very important for digestion. We see many people that complain as they age, digestion becomes more challenging. All of a sudden I have heartburn, or all of a sudden dairy bothers my stomach, right? Things don't agree with me anymore. A lot of this can be due to the fact that inadequate protein intake can mean that enzyme production decreases. So making sure that you have all the appropriate enzymes to break down the sugars and other breakdown products of our diet is very important. Your proteins needs don't really change with you age, but we find many older adults are just not getting enough protein. So the goal, 10 to 35% of your calories. I know that's a very, very wide range. So if you like the numbers better, more specific, 7 grams of protein per 20 pounds of body weight is a great way to do that calculation. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy a pack of protein bars, right? We don't need to be getting massive doses of protein in one sitting. I'd really rather you actually spread protein intake out throughout the day to help promote satiety and to help increase your body's ability to absorb that protein. Getting it all in one big dump in one meal is not going to be the best way to go about it. So including more plant-based sources of protein. This is something people tend to struggle with as they get older as well. Some of it just has to do with natural variety of diet wanes. Maybe you're not cooking as much anymore. You're empty nesters. A lot of my clients are people that are, sending off their last child to college, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, I've been focusing on feeding a family of 5 for the past 20 years, and now it's just 2 of us, and I don't know what to do next. This is a great time to evaluate your diet and see if you might make some healthy balance changes. So eating less of those high fat meats and dairy, sausage, bacon, try to keep your ground beef 80% or lower with that percentage fat to lean tissue. Red meat with visible fat or ribboning, this would be like a strip steak, or you can see the sirloin steak up at the top. All of this is saturated fat we want to have less of in our diet. Plant-based sources, you certainly do not have to become vegetarian or, of course, not a vegan. I am not, but I aim for at least one plant-based dinner with my family a week, and then more plant-based lunches. Very much more typical to have our animal proteins, at least in our evening meal. But I try to keep, a plant-based approach to the earlier part of the day. So nuts, beans, seeds, whole grains, fish and shellfish. Obviously, these are not plant-based, but examples of leaner proteins. And then remembering things like eggs, tofu, soy-based proteins. These are all wonderful sources as well. Soy-based proteins, completely safe. You don't want to get the isolated soy proteins you find in things like protein bars, but proteins like edamame, soy milk, tofu, completely safe. You don't need to worry about those. Okay, let's shift and talk about some of these aging-specific nutrients. And these are nutrients that are important for you at any level of aging across the spectrum of childhood or adulthood. But as we get older and things like osteopenia and osteoporosis become more prevalent issues, it is really important to have your knowledge down about these nutrients. So calcium. Right? Calcium is stored in our bones. It helps maintain our nervous system, which means it helps send some of the communications between nerve endings, let's say in your brain or your gut or in your extremities. It helps control muscle contraction. So if you're having issues with muscles or strength or spasming, then you would want to have your calcium levels checked. It's also necessary for blood clotting. So very important as risk for, let's say, fall or injury raises as we get older, to make sure your calcium stores are adequate. So slow bone loss begins around 40 to 45 years. I've hit it here, right? I said I'm at my 40th year. I'm not growing, I'm not maintaining. From now on, I'm losing bone mass. There's nothing that we can do about this, but you've got to slow the loss. That's our job from an aging perspective, is to slow the loss of bone health, keep the bones as strong as possible and the supporting muscles around them as strong as possible too. Women lose bone loss more rapidly. This has to do with the estrogen shifts that occur during menopause. Adequate calcium is needed to prevent osteoporosis, but daily recommended intake is controversial. What I will say is we benefit more from calcium in our diet than for supplementation, and you're going to hear me start to say this over and over and over again. So I do want you to look at that picture on the right, because it really does help to give you a visual sense of what osteoporosis is. So a normal bone matrix has little holes in it, right? If you think about it as like New York City's, skyscraper scaffolding, it's the complexity of the structure that makes it so strong. Basically, as we start to lose calcium in our bone, that structure starts to weaken. So imagine going to that, all of that structure that you have in the outside of a building and starting to remove some of those, metal pipes or that metal walkway. Eventually, it starts to weaken the internal structure. At what age should our calcium level be checked? And would that be through our doctor? Yes, fantastic question. So so your calcium level is part of a standard blood panel. So any of your general micronutrients. So that's going to cover your basic vitamins, minerals, fat soluble, water soluble, maybe some phytonutrients if you request them, but a standard blood panel. You can ask your doctor for this in your annual blood work appointment when they test your blood sugar and your cholesterol. Say, could you also run a micronutrient panel? I'd like to check my B vitamin levels, my calcium, my vitamin D. Very easy to do, same vials of blood. You should be having this checked. I would say kind of by 25, 30 years old, really, as we begin to do screening. It's not like getting a mammogram or a colonoscopy where it's incredibly intensive. So my feeling is with blood levels, why not get them checked? Let's see where they are. They can check blood, stool, or hair. They all measure for different micronutrients, but blood is, usually the easiest to go by. Role of vitamin D with calcium. We are going to get there in a second. Sit tight. It's coming. So interestingly, studies have shown that vitamin D and calcium supplementation do not prevent hip fractures. Like, I had to read that statement so many times because I was like, surely this is wrong. We tell everyone to supplement with vitamin D. We tell everyone to supplement with calcium. We've all seen this image, know how important calcium is. However, studies do not support that supplementation can prevent fracture. And in fact, high supplementation with calcium may raise your risk of kidney stones and heart attack. Now, I know you're going like, what is happening? She's blowing my mind right now. I did not know that this was the case. What I will say is Vitamin D and calcium are incredibly important within our body for internal structure, especially for aging. That doesn't mean I want you to run out and buy a vitamin D or a calcium supplement. The way that we absorb vitamin D and calcium is much more effective and bioavailable through whole food sources than it is through supplementation. And I'm going to talk about that a bunch more today, so don't worry. But I just want to start to lay the groundwork for that. Now, dairy is the easiest, most accessible source of calcium, but there are many other calcium-rich foods. These are an example. You're welcome to take a picture of this with your phone. All fantastic examples of foods that naturally contain calcium. Calcium is a water soluble. That means you don't need a fat present to absorb it. But what I will say is a diet high in calcium paired with a supplement is generally recommended. That supplement, and this is by doctors, that supplement is what I like to call like your fail-safe, but the supplement alone is not going to make the difference in terms of fall or risk prevention when it comes to fracture, which is really what we're talking about with calcium and vitamin D. I've never seen this part of my panel, so I will ask. Great. I'm so glad when people say things like that. Ask your doctors. I can guarantee you this can easily be part of a standard blood panel. So ask them to see it. Okay, let's talk about vitamin D because this is important. So calcium is what's stored in your bones, but vitamin D is needed to absorb calcium. I'm going to say that again. Vitamin D is needed to absorb calcium. So if your vitamin D levels are low, it does not matter how much calcium you are taking through your diet or through a supplement, your body cannot absorb it. Think of it as like the key, very much like how insulin can open the cell to allow glucose to go in. Your body needs the vitamin D to be there so that the calcium can be absorbed. So you've got some examples right here on the right of how vitamin D functions. You've probably heard that you get vitamin D through sunshine, processed through the skin. That's actually D3. So D25 is the active vitamin D that's in our body that goes, and I'm not going to complicate this more, but it basically gets converted in what's called 125D. That's what our body can use. That process happens through the liver and the kidneys. So we get D2 and D3 from foods such as eggs, mushrooms, and fish. D3 comes from the sun. You need to be in the sun without sunscreen for at least 15 minutes to be absorbing that vitamin D. So if you're sitting with SPF 30 on and being like, I'm getting my D, like you're not getting your D. But don't risk skin cancer for vitamin D. We can get it through other dietary sources. However, they're all biologically inert. We convert it into the active form in our body. Now, you should get your vitamin D status checked, just like your calcium. It's a serum concentration level. Excuse me, where are you going? And it will measure the blood levels that you're getting through your skin, your food, or supplements. So vitamin D is tricky because there aren't a lot of great food sources of vitamin D. Fatty fish, eggs, it's in the yolk. So if you're eating your egg whites, you're not getting your D. Cheese, liver, and beef. So if you're vegan, like, no, none of this is working for you. We do have fortified food. D is so rare in our food system that we fortify foods with vitamin D. So breakfast cereal, orange juice, mushrooms. But remember, vitamin D is fat soluble. So if you're just drinking a glass of orange juice in the morning and being like, I got my D, no, there's no fat in orange juice. So you're not going to absorb that. You need fat to be present. Sunscreens with an SPF 8 or over are going to block the production. So the supplements you can take are D2 or D3. A diet high in vitamin D paired with the supplement is what's generally recommended. Again, the supplement becomes the fail-safe. It should not be your only source. Okay, let's talk a little bit about antioxidants and aging, because this is one that I start to see become very popular. So, as my parents started to get older, it's the first thing that they would do. Well, I read from Dr. Gundry that I should be taking this, ginkgo biloba, and yes. So basically what happens is there's this cancer connection between antioxidants. So we have antioxidants and free radicals. They're believed to act as these radical scavengers. However, to date, no single research study has proven a connection between antioxidant supplementation and reduced cancer risk. So walk into the shelves of GNC today and look, all those antioxidants that are there being sold. We've never been able to prove through scientific research that taking an antioxidant supplement can reduce your cancer risk. In fact, we saw there was a study many years ago where study subjects experienced negative outcomes. So smokers that were giving a very high dose antioxidant actually had higher risks of lung cancer, which, this is an unfortunate thing about, medical research. So researchers have considered that single dose antioxidants aren't as beneficial as those in the food sources. So what does that mean? Well, there's lots of other places to get antioxidants other than supplementation. This is why we say eat the rainbow. So the difference in the variety of color that you see in this rainbow of fruits and vegetables is determined by the antioxidant and phytonutrient concentrations that we see. What am I talking about? Well, the orange peppers and the oranges and the orange mangoes all have similar phytonutrients in them, which is determined by their color. So cool. I mean, this is like Bill Nye, the science stuff. So red fruits and vegetables, all high in lycopene, orange beta carotene, yellow vitamin C, green folate, violet resveratrol. So this is why, yes, eating broccoli is great, but instead of you eating broccoli 5 days a week, I want you eating broccoli, radishes, butternut squash, apples, a variety of colors. And this is where you get your variety of antioxidants. So when we see antioxidant research having benefits in terms of things like cancer prevention and longevity, this is based on dietary input, not based on supplementation. So one final kind of supplement note here on omega-3 fatty acids. So these are polyunsaturated fatty acids associated with healthy aging and lower rates of chronic disease. So 3 different types: ALA, DHA, and EPA. This is the one area where studies have found individuals with the highest dietary intake of 3 PUFA, so 3 polyunsaturated fatty acid, had an 18% lower risk of unhealthy aging when compared to individuals with the lowest intake. That's pretty considerable, 18%. That's not something to shake your head at. So where do we get omega-3 fatty acids in our foods? These are some great sources. Again, you're welcome to take a picture of this with your phone: fatty fish, oysters, seaweed, mainly many things from the sea, but also nuts, beans, edamame. Those are ALA sources. And so what about the supplements? What do we, we think about aging, we think about checking those boxes. What do we think about these omega-3 fatty acid supplements? I would say compared to all the other supplements, these tend to have some more definitive benefits in terms of raising blood levels and bioabsorption, primarily because most people do not get enough of this in your diet, but we still do see bioavailability of omega-3s being stronger when they come through the dietary sources. If you're going to take a supplement, omega-3s would be one that I would consider. Just make sure you're getting a clinical grade fish oil and that you're getting it through a verified source. Okay, a final note in terms of healthy aging, and this is such an important one, is the importance of fitness. If I could take all the 20 and 30-year-old gym rats and be like, stay home, and instead be like 60 and 70-year-olds, here we go, I'm rounding you up, we gotta go. The benefits outweigh weight loss 100%. Weight loss to me, when it comes to fitness, is maybe like reason number 64 to move and exercise your body. But when we think about the detriments of aging, things that are harder to control, blood cholesterol levels naturally going up as we age. As we have less estrogen in our system for women, it's natural your blood cholesterol is going to go up. So we see spikes post-menopause for women. We also see blood pressure harder to control. We see that people really struggle with sleep as they get older. And look at all these benefits of fitness: improve blood pressure, improve cholesterol, improve sleep, decrease stress. Most importantly, though, to me, is posture and flexibility. Biggest risk with aging is, remember, we can't make those bones stronger, so it's our job to protect them. If you've had a family member who's fallen and broken a hip or had injury to a knee joint or an elbow, or you know how incredibly detrimental that loss of mobility can be in terms of aging. If you love to ski, surf, golf, all of this is going to be predicated upon your ability to move. And so adding some strength training, start now, get it in the habit of doing it. So much more important for aging than cardio. This will help to improve your posture and flexibility. It also increases energy and stamina. It will help to improve your sleep. It also helps with just connections, a social area. I love to see, groups of individuals, older individuals, finding fitness for the first time and finding, oh wow, like I do like Zumba, I do like doing, you know, some body weight training. You know, it is never ever too old to begin this, and the benefits are so incredibly important. So one final note, I added these slides in with COVID, and I thought about taking them out because I'm like, are we beyond talking about this? But to be honest, the cold and flu season I've seen in my area already, I have 3 kids in their ages. You know, we're gearing up for a difficult health season this fall and winter. It's just a reality that I think we all live in now. And in terms of aging, you know, immunity becomes more of a concern, right? We heard this all through COVID, that biggest risk to the youngest and oldest, right? So I just want to put it out there and say, when it comes to COVID, even when it comes to cold and flu season, you know, immune boosting claims, can they be trusted for common cold and flu, zinc, vitamin C, elderberry, probiotics? You know, these things can help shore up your immune system when you're healthy, helps you have a better defense system when you come in contact with flu or cold germs, but it can't prevent you from getting sick. And that's just the reality. And I think we've learned that through COVID, that some people have gotten very sick, some people have gotten much less sick. A lot of it has to do with immune health going into these seasons. So shore up your immunity now. Exercise, get outside, get fresh air, eat a variety of plant foods. If you want to take a daily probiotic, it's not going to hurt you. I generally don't recommend it for otherwise healthy people. These are all common cold and flu common cold and flu supplements that, you know, can they hurt you? No. Are they going to do a lot for you? Probably not either. One last note on vitamin D and COVID, then I'll open it up for the questions. So this was something that became a very popular party line probably last year during COVID, but I've heard it repeated that, you know, is there a relationship between your vitamin D status and COVID-19? So we do see rates of COVID are higher in people with a vitamin D deficiency. Is that proving causation? Absolutely not. This is just correlation. However, if you have a low vitamin D deficiency, we know that's a risk for your calcium absorption, right? Could potentially be a risk for you being susceptible to COVID. So I put that out there. This research is still very new, but some of it is very promising and interesting. We don't see that treating, you know, COVID with high dose vitamin D. That's something that got, you know, pushed around in the vernacular for a while. I wouldn't say that there's any salt to that, but I would say, bottom line, get your vitamin D status checked, because as you go into cold and flu season, or as you're thinking about aging, it's important to make sure that your blood levels are where they should be. So final thoughts, food and supplements not processed the same way in the body. The best research we have about nutrition and aging is on diet and movement. And the combination of this balance plate along with the triad of satiety will really help to keep your body nourished and fueled both physically and emotionally. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I have one here in the chat box already. Please feel free to add some more. I will answer them as they come in. We're right at 1 minute after the half hour. So if you have to jump, I completely understand. I just want to thank you so much for joining and being here today. Really hope you found the content useful and helpful. So I have a question here that says, I'm finding no matter how healthy I eat and move, my cholesterol and blood pressure are creeping up. I'm told this is most likely familial. Can you speak to this? Absolutely. So cholesterol, yes. So there is a massive genetic component to blood cholesterol levels. So first of all, it's valuable for you to know, talk to your siblings, talk to your parents. Do they have naturally high blood cholesterol levels? It's something we see in different type of lineages and cultures. And it does, can you go back to the last slide for a minute? Of course. So let me know if this is the slide that you were talking about. So yes, it's worthwhile to know what your genealogy is in terms of cholesterol and to let your doctor know that as well. What we're finding now is that blood cholesterol on its own is no longer as quick of a trigger to put someone on a statin as it used to be. I want to, you know, just kind of caveat that by saying you should always have a conversation with your doctor, but it used to be that once you hit 200, it was like immediate statin, right? And we're finding that's not really the case. It's a combination of potentially having an EKG done, having your carotid plaque checked, blood pressure, diet, because really what we're looking at is overall risk for a cardiac or stroke event, right? And so don't feel as though a high blood cholesterol is, you know, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to go on medication. It is something that's worth watching, but you wanna see the bigger picture, but genetics play a big deal. Blood pressure, a little bit different. You know, blood pressure is really showing what is the type of, not a better word, but pressure, but the how taxed is the system, right? So I think of blood pressure like an accordion. So when you're going through your systolic and diastolic of your heart expanding and pumping, it's like the accordion opens, and then how much effort does it take to push the accordion back together, right? The size of the accordion is not changing, but how much more effort is it to pump that 2,000 gallons of blood around your body? The more pressure we put on that system, the more plaque that builds in your arteries and the more hardened they become, the more taxing it is. And that's basically the measure of your blood pressure, right? Whatever it is, 120/80, as that number goes up, it's saying, wow, it's more work for your body to pump the same amount of blood around the same system. And eventually you're taxing that system, more than you should be. So that is less genetically related. That is usually more related to your individual, what's going on with you individually than blood cholesterol. That was a very long answer. Apology. Thank you. I love the analogy too. I'm like, at some point, someone's not going to know what an accordion is, and that's going to be unfortunate. But someone said they'd love to connect with me offline. You guys are always welcome to send me an email. It's just katie@wellnessbykatie.com. I'm always happy to answer more questions that you might have. If you want to put anything else in the chat box, I'm happy to take it. If not, I want to thank you so much for being here. I love all the interaction. You guys are a fantastic group. Thank you so much for participating. You're welcome. And I hope to see you at the next one. Absolutely. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I hope that you enjoyed the content and hope that you'll join us for our next session. Thanks again.